Margaret's neighbors started calling her Two-Roof Maggie in August, and not as a compliment. "What in God's name are you building?" Dale from across the road had shouted as Margaret hauled timber up onto her cabin's existing roof. "A treehouse? A helicopter pad?" "A second roof," Margaret had called back, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her work glove. "For protection." Dale had laughed so hard he'd bent over double, slapping his knee. "Protection from what? Flying squirrels? UFOs? Woman, you've lost your mind." His wife Betty had come out to see what the commotion was about, taken one look at Margaret's project, and shaken her head slowly. "Bless her heart," Betty had said, loud enough for Margaret to hear. "Divorce really did a number on her." Margaret hadn't bothered explaining. People who didn't want to understand wouldn't understand anyway. She'd learned that lesson over the past few months. She'd bought the small cabin 18 months ago, after the divorce from Thomas was finalized. It was all she could afford. A modest log structure on 3 acres at the edge of the mountain community. Basic, but solid. Her 9-year-old son Noah had his own small bedroom, barely big enough for a bed and a dresser, but he loved it. He'd painted the walls himself, choosing a forest green that reminded him of the trees outside his window. Thomas had gotten the house in town, the nice 3-bedroom with the finished basement and 2-car garage. He'd gotten the new SUV, most of their savings, and his freedom to be with his secretary, Jennifer. Margaret had gotten Noah, her beat-up 15-year-old truck that burned oil, and enough money for a down payment on the cheapest property she could find. The cabin had been marketed as rustic and charming, which she'd quickly learned were real estate terms for needs a lot of work. But it was hers, and more importantly, it was Noah's home. That made it precious. The only problem was the roof. Margaret had noticed it the first winter, during a particularly heavy December storm. The way snow accumulated, heavy and thick, pressing down on the structure with what felt like malevolent intent. The way ice dams formed at the edges, causing water to back up under the shingles and leak into Noah's bedroom. The way the entire cabin seemed to groan and creak under the weight during heavy storms. Sounds that kept her awake all night. She'd climbed up several times with a shovel to clear snow, terrified each time that she'd slip on the icy shingles and fall, break a leg or worse, leave Noah alone and helpless. Once she'd actually slipped, caught herself at the last second on the chimney, dangled there for a heart-stopping moment while Noah watched from below, his face white with fear. That night, lying awake listening to the structure creak, she'd made a decision. Never again. She would find a solution, whatever it took.
"This roof won't survive a really bad winter,"
she'd told the local builder, Carl Wilson, when she'd asked him to assess it that spring. Carl was in his 50s, had been building in these mountains for 30 years. Carl had walked around the cabin, knocked on a few exposed beams, and shrugged. "It's survived 20 winters already. Just clear the snow off after big storms and you'll be fine." "But what if I can't get up there? What if it's too dangerous?" "Then you pray it holds." He'd said it matter-of-factly, like that was reasonable advice. "Can you reinforce it? Add support beams?" Carl had pulled out a small notebook, done some calculations, and whistled. "I could, but we're talking serious work. You're looking at $6,000, maybe $7,000. Margaret had felt her heart sink. She didn't have $6,000. She barely had $600 in savings. "Isn't there a cheaper option?" "Sure, don't worry about it." That answer hadn't satisfied Margaret. She'd started researching on her own, spending evenings at the county library, checking out books on structural engineering and traditional building techniques. That's when she'd found references to double roof construction, a concept used in alpine regions of Europe where heavy snow loads were guaranteed every winter. The idea was elegantly simple. Build a secondary roof structure above the primary roof, creating an air gap and a protective barrier that distributed weight. The more she read, the more sense it made. And crucially, the materials cost would be under $2,000 if she did the labor herself. She'd even call the structural engineer 2 counties over. To her surprise, he'd been encouraging. "In theory, it's quite sound," he'd told her. "Double roof systems are well established in regions with heavy snow. The key is proper load distribution and adequate support posts. You'd essentially be creating a protective shell that carries snow weight directly to the ground." Margaret had taken pages of notes during that conversation, her confidence growing. Her ex-husband Thomas heard about the project through their son and immediately called, his voice dripping with condescension. "Margaret, what's this about you building some kind of structure on your roof?" "A second roof, for snow protection." "A second roof." He'd said it slowly. "You're building a second roof on a cabin that already has a roof." "The existing roof isn't adequate for heavy snow loads." "And you determined this how? Did you suddenly become a structural engineer?" "Margaret, this is insane. You're embarrassing yourself. More importantly, you're embarrassing our son. Do you know what people are saying?" "I don't particularly care what people are saying." "Well, you should care. Noah told me kids at school are making fun of him because his mom is building crazy things." Margaret had felt anger flash through her. "Thomas, you left us with almost nothing. I'm doing what I need to do to keep Noah safe. If you don't like it, you're welcome to pay for professional contractors." The silence on the other end had been satisfying. "If you keep acting irrationally, Margaret, I'm going to petition the court for a custody modification. I'm documenting all of this." He'd hung up before she could respond, leaving her shaking with anger and fear. The mockery from the community had been relentless. Margaret's cabin was visible from the main road, and her construction project quickly became the talk of the small mountain community. People would slow down driving past, some even pulling over to take pictures with their phones. The local diner had become ground zero for jokes about her project. Margaret had gone in for coffee one Saturday morning and heard table after table discussing her. "Anyone seen Margaret's spaceship yet?" Someone had laughed. "I heard she's building a platform for when the aliens come." The hardware store wasn't better. The owner, Brett, was in his 20s and thought he was funny. Every time Margaret came in for supplies, he'd have a new joke. "Building an ark up there, Margaret? Expecting a flood in the mountains?" Margaret's friend Linda had tried a gentler approach over coffee. "Maggie, honey, I'm worried about you. People are saying maybe the divorce was harder on you than you're letting on. That maybe you're fixating on this building project as a way to avoid dealing with emotional stuff." "Linda, I've dealt with the divorce. What I'm doing now is dealing with a practical problem. My cabin's roof isn't adequate for severe winter weather." "But a second roof, Maggie, it's so unusual. People don't do that. People in Norway do it. People in Switzerland do it. This isn't crazy, it's practical engineering." Linda had reached across the table, squeezed Margaret's hand. "I'm just saying, maybe take a break from building? Let people see you're normal." Normal. That word again. Margaret had thanked Linda for the coffee and left, but Noah had been her rock through everything. At 9 years old, he loved helping, learning the names of different tools, practicing measuring, holding pieces steady while she drilled. One afternoon in July, as they worked together, he'd asked, "Mom, why don't people understand what we're doing?" Margaret had paused. "Because it's different, buddy. and people are often afraid of things that are different. It's easier to make fun of something new than to try to understand it. But we're not doing anything bad. I know. But sometimes people would rather stick with what they know, even if what they know doesn't work very well. Noah had been quiet for a moment. Then he'd said, "Dad called me last week. He asked a lot of questions about what we're doing here. Then he said you're acting weird and I should tell him if you're doing other weird stuff." Margaret's drill had slipped. "What did you tell him?" "I told him you're the smartest person I know, and if you think we need a second roof, we probably need it. Then I showed him the calculations you taught me. I don't think he understood, though." Margaret had set down the drill and pulled her son into a hug, fighting tears. "Thank you for believing in me, Noah." "It's not believing, Mom. It's knowing." The construction had taken the entire summer. Margaret worked before her shifts at the grocery store, on weekends from dawn until dark, by headlamp some evenings after Noah went to bed. She'd built a frame structure approximately 18 inches above the existing roof, using pressure-treated lumber. 6 main support posts, each 8 inches square, sunk 4 feet into the ground through holes she'd dug by hand, set in concrete footings she'd mixed herself in a wheelbarrow. The design was simple but elegant. The posts connected to a frame of horizontal and angled beams that would bear the weight of the new roof. The new roof itself was slightly larger than the original, extending past the cabin's walls by 2 feet on each side, creating overhangs that would help direct snow and water away. She'd used corrugated metal roofing, lightweight but incredibly strong and, crucially, slippery enough that snow would slide off more easily than from the original asphalt shingle roof below. She'd calculated the pitch carefully. Steep enough for snow to shed, not so steep that it would create dangerous avalanches. The air gap between the 2 roofs served multiple purposes: additional insulation in both winter and summer, ventilation to prevent ice dams, and most importantly, structural load distribution. If heavy snow accumulated on the upper roof, the supporting posts would carry the weight straight down to the ground, completely bypassing the cabin's original structure. Every joint was reinforced with metal brackets. Every connection was waterproofed. Every measurement was double-checked. Margaret worked with the meticulous attention of someone who knew her family's safety depended on getting it right. By late August, Carl the builder had stopped by and had stood staring at Margaret's work for a long moment, then walked around it, examining the connections. "Well, I'll be damned," he'd finally said. "This is actually competent work. More than competent, really. Where'd you learn to build like this?" "Books, internet research, phone calls to engineers, and a lot of careful thinking." He'd tested one of the support posts, pushing hard. It didn't budge. "These are solid. Deep footings?" 4 feet, below the frost line, set in concrete with proper drainage. "And the weight distribution?" He'd traced the beam structure with his eyes. "Yeah, I see what you're doing. The load goes straight to the posts, not through the original roof structure. Smart." He'd paused, then added, "Still unnecessary for our climate, but smart engineering." "We'll see whether it's unnecessary," Margaret had said quietly. Carl had nodded slowly. "I was dismissive of you in the spring. I apologize for that. This is good work, Margaret. Really good work." It was the first real validation she'd received from anyone besides Noah. By September, the second roof was complete. Margaret stood in her driveway on a cool evening, Noah beside her, looking up at what they'd built. It did look strange. Her small log cabin now had a larger, peaked metal roof hovering above it like a protective umbrella, supported by 6 substantial posts. "It's beautiful," Noah had said. "You think so?" Yeah, it looks strong, like nothing could hurt it. The local newspaper had run a piece the next week. Local woman builds hat for her house. Fashion statement or madness? Margaret had cut out the article and pinned it to her refrigerator. Noah had drawn a big smiley face on it and written, "Mom's smart," across the top. The mockery reached its peak in September and October. A Facebook group for the mountain community had multiple threads discussing two-roof Maggie. Margaret had seen some of the posts when Linda showed them to her. She's clearly traumatized by the divorce and fixating on control issues. Poor kid growing up with such a paranoid mother. Margaret had read them, felt the sting, then consciously chosen to let it go. She knew what she'd built. She knew why. October brought the first hints that Margaret's instincts might be correct. The weather patterns were genuinely unusual. Early cold snaps that killed gardens overnight, volatile temperature swings. The old-timers started making ominous comments. "Feels like a bad one coming," old Pete had said at the hardware store one afternoon, studying the sky. Pete was 76, had been born in these mountains. "What makes you say that?" Margaret had asked. "The animals know. You pay attention to animals, they'll tell you what's coming. Look at how thick the squirrels' nests are this year, how early the birds migrated. The deer are coming down from the high country earlier than usual. Nature's smarter than any weather service, and nature's saying something big is coming." "What should people do?" Pete had fixed her with a steady gaze. "Stock up. Get your firewood early. Check your heating systems. Make sure your roof is solid." He'd paused. "Though I reckon you already did that last part. You might have the last laugh, two-roof Maggie." Margaret had taken his advice seriously and increased her preparations even more. More firewood stacked under the protective overhang of her new roof structure. More canned goods, rice, beans, flour. More lamp oil and candles. A comprehensive medical kit. She'd insulated the exposed pipes, reinforced the well house, tested the generator. Her neighbors noticed, and it added fuel to the gossip. "Margaret's gone full prepper now. That poor kid's going to grow up thinking the world is ending." November arrived with unusual warmth, and people laughed harder. "Guess that second roof was a waste after all," Dale had shouted. "Mildest November in years." But Margaret had read enough meteorology to know that unusual warmth before winter often meant the opposite was building. The weather forecasters started sounding concerned by late November. A massive Arctic system was colliding with Pacific moisture. "We could be looking at a historic winter storm event," they warned. "Potentially historic snow accumulations." Suddenly, the hardware store was crowded. People who'd mocked Margaret were scrambling to prepare, but they'd waited too long. Supplies were running low. "Storm's coming faster than folks think," Pete had muttered. He was right. December opened with meteorologists using words like unprecedented and potentially catastrophic. Margaret had driven to town on December 2nd and bought final supplies. The store owner, Rick, had looked at her cart and said, "Guess you weren't so crazy after all, Margaret." "I'm not crazy at all, Rick. I never was. I was just prepared." The storm hit on December 5th. It started as light snow in the morning, pretty and peaceful. Margaret and Noah had made pancakes for breakfast, watched the flakes drift down. By mid-morning, the wind had picked up. By noon, it was snowing harder. By evening, it was a full blizzard. Horizontal snow driven by winds over 70 miles per hour, visibility reduced to 0. Margaret and Noah stayed inside, comfortable and warm. The wood stove glowed steadily. They played board games, read books, baked cookies. Outside, the wind howled and shrieked, but inside they were safe. Margaret checked the second roof periodically. Snow was accumulating on it, but sliding off in regular intervals, preventing dangerous buildup. The design was working exactly as intended. The snow fell for 36 hours straight. When it finally stopped on December 7th, Margaret opened the door carefully and had to push hard through a drift. The world had been transformed. Snow had accumulated to depths she'd never imagined possible. 4 feet of base snow everywhere, with drifts reaching 8 or 9 feet. Her second roof had performed perfectly. The structure stood strong and clear, the metal surface mostly clear of snow. The support posts showed not a hint of strain. The original roof beneath was completely protected. Margaret looked up at her creation and felt tears of relief and vindication. But then she noticed something terrifying. Smoke was coming from only 3 chimneys in the visible neighborhood, and Dale's house across the road had partially collapsed. The roof had buckled, caving in the center section. Margaret grabbed her emergency radio and started cycling through channels, trying to reach anyone. Static, mostly. Then,
This is Linda. Margaret, are you there? Please, God, be there. Linda, I'm here. We're okay. What's your situation?
Linda's voice was shaking.
The roof is leaking. No, not leaking. It's pouring in. Part of the ceiling fell in about an hour ago. It's freezing, Margaret. Maybe 35 degrees. We can't get the heat working. I think the chimney is blocked. The doors are completely blocked by snow. We're trapped. Can you see out any windows? Barely. Snow is literally up to the second floor windows. Okay. I'm going to try to get to you. How far are you from me? Maybe a quarter mile? But Margaret, you can't possibly. I have snowshoes. I have emergency supplies. Tell me your exact situation. Me and the girls, Emily and Sophie. No injuries yet, but Sophie's fingers are white, and Emily keeps saying she's sleepy. Margaret recognized hypothermia signs. Keep them moving. Make them walk around, do jumping jacks, anything. I'm coming now. She turned to Noah. Buddy, I need you to stay here and keep the fire going. Noah's eyes had gone wide. Then I'm coming with you. Margaret had wanted to say no, but looking at his determined face, she'd realized he was right. She might need help, and leaving him alone wasn't safer. Okay, but you listen to every single thing I say. This is serious. I know, Mom. I promise. They'd bundled up in every layer they owned, strapped on snowshoes, loaded a backpack with emergency supplies, and headed out into an alien landscape. The journey to Linda's house, normally a 5-minute walk, became a 90-minute epic struggle. They had to navigate through chest-deep snow, around massive drifts, over obstacles completely hidden beneath the white surface. Noah struggled despite the snowshoes, using a long stick to probe for hidden dangers. The temperature was brutally cold, probably around 0. The wind cut through their layers, made breathing painful. Margaret had to stop several times to check on Noah, to let him rest. Can you keep going? She'd ask. Yes, he'd answer, determined. Linda needs us. When they finally reached Linda's house, the situation was worse than feared. Part of the roof had collapsed, and snow had poured into the house. Linda and her 2 daughters were huddled in the kitchen, wrapped in every blanket they owned. But it wasn't enough. All 3 showed signs of hypothermia, violent shivering, confusion, lethargy. Oh, thank God, Linda sobbed when she saw them. Margaret, I'm so sorry. Sorry for doubting you. Sorry for thinking you were crazy. Later. Margaret cut her off, gently but firmly. Right now we need to get you to my cabin. We need to move fast. Can you walk? I think so. But the girls... Bundle them up in everything warm. We're leaving right now. The return journey was harder, with 3 additional people in various stages of hypothermia. Sophie, the youngest, had to be carried, Margaret and Linda taking turns, the effort leaving them gasping. Emily struggled but kept going, her face white. Noah helped guide them, staying near Emily to help when she fell. Come on, Emily, he'd encourage. Just a little farther. Think about hot chocolate. It took over 2 hours. By the time they stumbled through Margaret's door, all of them were dangerously cold. Margaret immediately went into emergency mode. She stoked the fire hot, got everyone out of wet layers, wrapped them in dry blankets, made hot soup. Within an hour, everyone's shivering had decreased. Within 2 hours, color was returning to faces. That night, Margaret's cabin held 7 people. She'd given Linda and the girls her bedroom. She and Noah would sleep near the wood stove. Margaret, Linda had said that evening, I owe you my life, my daughter's lives. If you hadn't come, you would have done the same for us. Would I? I laughed at you, Margaret. I thought you needed therapy, and then you risked your life to save us. You're my friend. Friends help each other. Over the next week, the situation deteriorated throughout the community as more storms rolled through. Each brought more snow, more wind, more cold. And more neighbors found their way to Margaret's cabin. Dale came on day 3, with frost-bitten fingers and a face full of shame. His house was uninhabitable. Margaret treated his frostbite, fed him soup, gave him blankets without reproach. I was wrong, Dale had said simply. About everything. Old Pete arrived on day 4, having made the journey from half a mile away. His chimney was blocked, and at 76, he didn't have the strength to clear it. Figured you'd have room, he'd said. The Morrison family appeared on day 6, having heard through the radio network that Margaret's cabin was intact. Their heating system had failed. Even Carl, the builder who'd told her the second roof was unnecessary, showed up on day 8. He'd been trying to reinforce his own roof when a section collapsed under him. He could barely look at Margaret. I was wrong, he'd said quietly. You tried to tell me. I'm sorry. You're here now, Carl. You're safe. Come inside. By day 10, Margaret's small cabin was sheltering 12 people. She established strict schedules for everything: cooking, cleaning, firewood duty. She rationed food carefully. She organized work teams with those strong enough to go outside. Noah had become essential. He tended the fire constantly, entertained younger children, helped cook and clean. And the second roof stood firm. Storm after storm, snow kept accumulating. While houses throughout the community suffered progressive damage, Margaret's cabin remained solid. I still don't understand, Carl had said one evening. We should be hearing stress, but it's solid as bedrock. Because the second roof is doing exactly what I designed it to do, Margaret explained. The weight of the snow is on the upper roof structure supported by posts that go straight to the ground. All that weight travels down the posts. It never touches the cabin's original structure. And this roof? This roof only has to support normal loads, us, furniture, ceiling materials. It was designed for that, not for several tons of snow. Carl had shaken his head. It's brilliant, simple, elegant, effective. And I called you crazy. The storm system continued through December into January. Emergency services couldn't reach the community for 2 full weeks. Roads were completely impassable. When the National Guard finally broke through on January 7th, they found a community in crisis.
3 houses had completely collapsed. At least 20 had major structural damage. Multiple injuries, dozens of frostbite cases, several hypothermia cases. And Margaret's cabin, which had sheltered 17 people at its peak, all of them safe. The guard medic who checked everyone, a woman named Torres, had looked at Margaret with awe. "Ma'am, I've been doing disaster response for 15 years. I've never seen anything like this. You kept 17 people alive in a cabin designed for 2 during one of the worst winter storms in recorded history. How?" "I prepared, and I built a second roof. Mind if I take detailed pictures? This is going into our training materials." The story spread with remarkable speed once communications were restored. Local news covered it first. Local woman's crazy roof design saves lives during historic blizzard. Then regional news. Then national coverage. Within a week, Margaret's second roof was being discussed on morning shows, analyzed by engineering professors, featured in architectural magazines. Engineering professors requested detailed plans. The Army Corps of Engineers wanted information for disaster preparedness guidelines. A building materials manufacturer wanted to develop a kit based on her design. Margaret's crazy second roof had become a case study, a symbol of practical innovation. Thomas had called one evening, his voice quiet and humble. "Margaret, I saw the national coverage. I'm sorry. For everything. For doubting you. For threatening custody. You saved lives. You saved our son. You're an incredible mother." "Thank you," Margaret had said simply. Her neighbors apologized in various ways. Dale had actually cried at her kitchen table. "My house is destroyed. Everything I own is ruined. But I'm alive because you took me in. I'm sorry, Margaret, for the mockery, all of it." "Dale, I didn't do it for gratitude. I did it because it needed doing." But the most meaningful moment came from Noah one evening in late January, after their last guests had left. "Mom, Dad told me you were obsessed with being prepared because you were scared of the world. But that's not it, is it?" "No, it's not. You're not scared of the world. You're just ready for it." Margaret had pulled her son close. "That's exactly right. Being prepared isn't about fear. It's about respect. Respecting that nature is powerful, that systems can fail. And when you respect those realities, you prepare. Not because you're scared, but because you're smart. Everyone thinks you're a hero now." "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who built a second roof." But Noah had shaken his head. "No, Mum. You're someone who had the courage to do the right thing, even when everyone said it was wrong." By February, the community began the long process of rebuilding. Many homeowners requested that their new roofs incorporate double roof principles similar to Margaret's design. Carl, the builder, found himself overwhelmed with work, all of it for reinforced, innovative roof systems. Margaret was offered consulting jobs. Architects wanted her input on snow-resistant designs. She accepted some, enjoying the work and significant income, but her priority remained her cabin and Noah. The hardware store gave her a lifetime discount. The diner named a sandwich after her, the 2 Roof Special. The mayor presented her with a community service award. The college invited her to lecture. One warm afternoon in early March, as the massive snowdrifts finally began melting and the first green shoots appeared, Margaret and Noah did spring maintenance on the second roof, checking joints, replacing screws, clearing debris. "Think we'll need it again next winter?" Noah asked. "Probably not this dramatically, but yes, we'll need it.
Extreme weather is becoming more common, and we'll be ready. Mom, can I tell you something? Always. I'm proud that you're my mum, even when kids made fun of me, even when everyone called you crazy. I knew you were doing something important. And you were right. You saved people's lives. Margaret looked out over the valley, at the community rebuilding, at neighbors who now waved with genuine respect. We were right, Noah. We're a team, remember? The best team, he'd agreed. That evening, as the sun set over the mountains and smoke rose peacefully from the cabin's chimney, Margaret stood outside and looked up at her second roof one more time. The structure that had been mocked, photographed for ridicule, called crazy and excessive and paranoid. The structure that had saved 17 lives. She thought about all the people who'd laughed, all the times she doubted herself, all the moments when it would have been easier to give up. She thought about the Facebook posts, the newspaper jokes, the sideways looks at the grocery store. And she thought about how none of that mattered compared to the moment when desperate neighbors had stumbled through chest-deep snow to her door, freezing and terrified, and found shelter and warmth and safety waiting. Margaret smiled and went inside, where Noah had hot chocolate ready and a fire burning warm. Outside, the second roof stood sentinel in the twilight, strange and beautiful, and absolutely necessary. A monument to practical innovation, to the courage it takes to be right when everyone says you're wrong, and to the simple truth that sometimes the craziest-looking solution is actually the smartest one of all. They'd called her Two-Roof Maggie as an insult, a joke, a sign of her supposed instability. Now they called her that with respect, with gratitude, even with affection. And when the next winter came, and the one after that, Margaret's second roof stood ready, a guardian against storms, a testament to preparation over panic, and a reminder that being called crazy often just means being ahead of your time.